It said that the Valsalva maneuver and a belt like could be causing that. And I was pretty frank that, okay, well, if that's going to be your solution, I'm probably just going to leave and go keep peeing myself.
All right, so we are going full circle here. I am so excited to have Allie Feras come on, and Allie was one of my very, 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 I think you probably were the first of my lifting clients ever in my career, and bless her heart, she tolerated me and taught me so much. And I wanted to bring Allie. Allie's come full circle now because she's having a baby, and I'm so excited to have Allie come on. And we were kind of chatting before this, and then I was like, let's get this stuff on here because when Allie and I first started working together, I didn't know much. I wasn't lifting, I wasn't doing anything. And then in walks this woman who says, I need help. And by the way, my 1 rep max is like, what was it, like 330 or something?
Probably somewhere around there at the time. Yeah.
And when you work in hospital based and somebody's like, yeah, I was like, how do you reproduce that? So I'm so glad that you you tolerated me, and thank you so much for hopping on, and like let's flash back a little bit and then let's flash forward.
Yeah.
So let's actually just start with like you're a badass lifter. First of all, can we just start with that? Like tell me a little bit about like kind of where you were in that time and space, and like you were lifting and trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So I'm actually going to pull this question off for a second and be like, just tell me where you were kind of when we met.
Yeah. So I think it was it like 2016, 2015, somewhere in there?
15 sounds right, because I started CrossFit in 16.
Okay.
So probably it was like 15, 16. That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Somewhere in there. So at the time you were working at Georgetown, right?
Yeah, at the hospital. Yep.
And I was working actually in Georgetown's library.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So I was like, oh, there's a pelvic floor physical therapist on campus, 5 minutes from my office. I'm just going to pop over there.
Sure.
Super convenient. But yeah. So I was competing in powerlifting at the time. It was a big part of my life. And I, competed at nationals, not winning nationals, but, I would go every year and,
big deal, by the way, big deal.
Thank you. It was a little, big part of my life, very involved at the time in the powerlifting organization and all of that. So I had found in maybe the year or two before that, probably around the time when I first deadlifted about 275, I would pee myself a little bit. And I was like, well, it's my max. It happens to people sometimes.
Yeah.
But then as I got stronger and I got to the point where 275 was like a regular training weight, I was still peeing myself every time I lifted more than 275, which essentially meant every time I deadlifted, which was like twice a week.
Right.
And that's not fun for anybody. It's not fun for me. That's not fun for the people I'm training with.
No, not so much.
Became a running joke. But I was like, all right. And so actually at nationals that year, I hit a deadlift PR and it was just all over the platform, like visible.
I think you showed me the video from that too. Like you had so many videos and stuff that we watched, and I was like,
oh yeah,
holy
shit, yeah. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to see what can be done about this, right? I want to, I heard a little bit about pelvic floor physical therapy, probably in just articles and blogs and Instagram and things like that. And I said, okay, I'm going to find someone local. And I ended up finding Carrie, and she, you're so, like, oh, thank you for tolerating me. Like, you were such a great help and you were fantastic. So,
I had no idea what I'm just going to, full disclosure. I mean, I remember when you came in and I had started having conversations with other therapists who have now become great friends and colleagues, like Anthony Lowe in Australia. I was like, hey, so I got this girl and she lifts a lot and I've got a bunch of videos, and what do we do? And I remember just like trying to throw groupthink at it.
Yeah.
And because and again, I think that was probably one of the things that made it easy to start, was because your coach was out of town, you had a ton of videos.
Hmm.
And I think from what a lot of what I was taught at that time, and there was this kind of love-hate relationship between, like, whether you knew it or not, between PT and like CrossFit and lifting and things like that from
Hmm.
a pelvic floor perspective.
Right.
Like, you know, belts may not be this great thing, or, Valsalva and all of that. And I wasn't lifting at the time and really trying to kind of unpack that and study it. And we'd just
Mhm.
been talking. You're like, I asked you, what did I ask you about?
Oh yeah, you'd
Yeah.
said that the Valsalva maneuver and a belt like could be causing that, and I was pretty frank that okay, well if that's going to be your solution, I'm probably just going to leave and go keep peeing myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's a part of the sport and it's
Yeah.
important. And I think as a lifter, and especially as a woman involved in lifting, because I've been lifting and competing in powerlifting since maybe 2011, 2012. So it was like
Yeah.
even less common for women back then.
Yep.
Blew up so much more in that time frame.
Sure.
You're very used to, when it comes to medical professionals, no one knowing what the heck you're talking
Exactly.
about, right?
Exactly.
So you get used to, you say you lift and they're like, oh yeah, like you do some curls. Like, no, no, no,
No.
no. So you need to be very clear about what it is that you're doing.
Right.
So I think at that point I was pretty used to, having to be upfront about that.
Yep.
And so I really appreciated how receptive you were, right? Because it might not have been something you were familiar with. And to you, the solution may have been, stop breath holding, stop wearing a belt. But when I said, that's non negotiable for me because it's part of my sport and it's
Yeah.
important to me, you were like, okay, we're
Yeah.
going to work
No,
on
I
that
remember
then.
asking you
Yeah.
that, and I was like, "So, how willing are you to change this stuff?" And you're like, "I'm not." I'm like, Okay." Like,
Completely unwilling,
like,
right? And
crap,
that's
now I gotta come up with something else.
yeah. I won't jump ahead to pregnancy too much, but that's one of those things where it's like when your priorities are different,
Yeah.
what you do is different. At the time, my priority was competitive powerlifting,
Yep.
right? Now there's different strategies because I
Yeah.
have different priorities, but
Yep.
then
Well, exactly,
that's
and
what it
I
is.
think that's where, again, the conversation I have now around that, like, I'm fully aware now that, like, you cannot lift the loads that you were lifting without breath holding. There is no way in
No,
God's green earth that you can get
no,
that off the ground. It has
not
to
happening.
happen. And same
Mm-hmm.
thing, with a belt and all of that, like, it just has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think one of the things that I run across now, and I don't relate to as much because I started lifting after babies, are women like yourself that were lifting before,
Mm-hmm.
and this, maybe they didn't have issues before, but
Mm-hmm.
they get freaked out because they're like, was everything that I was taught before, was that wrong? And I'm like,
Right.
no, I want to start with what you were taught was not wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but what you were taught, we've got to change it now because the scenario is different. The
Yeah.
scenario is different.
Yeah.
So
And for me, I guess at the time I was probably mid 20s.
yeah.
And, we were like talking about having kids eventually. And I was like, if I am peeing my pants now,
Now.
like I don't even want to think about what's going to happen to me after I have kids.
Right. Well, and
So
full
that was a
disclosure,
big part of it for me too. The
yeah,
motivation to go get treatment,
but
right?
the fact that you took that, and then I remember you telling me at the time that you knew this person that I think was from YouTube at the time. And again, this is a while ago, so Instagram really wasn't a thing. YouTube was still like, oh, it's
Yeah,
coming back again,
huge.
like that sort of thing. And you're like, oh, I have this person, and we're going to talk about this. And
Hmm.
you had the video with Meg Squats.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it and being so incredibly proud of how you took that information and you put it in the context that made sense
Hmm.
to your people. And I was like, girl is paying it forward. Like, I was just, and I still use that video when I teach my PT students, because I'm like, look what she did. This is the impact you can
Aw.
have on people. And I'm like, this is what you can do with your career. so
Aw, thank you. Yeah,
so
so
I still
Meg,
pull that. Yeah.
at the time we were training at the same gym together, and we
Oh, no
were, she's a
kidding.
friend of mine.
Yeah.
And, before she like really, has done so much with her business and with
Right.
her, social presence and all of that, which is amazing. Um, And so as she was starting to put out more YouTube videos and all of that, I'd been talking to her in the gym about what I'd been doing with you, and that she'd seen me pee at nationals. We were at nationals together, and then she'd seen me improve in the gym, and we were talking about it. She's like, I think that'd be a really cool video to do. We should talk about it. So, because she was looking for content and things to get out to people, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's something that she's seen other women, struggle with and all of that. So I thought that was a really cool opportunity to do that. And it's actually, for years after that video, I would just get random Instagram DMs, I'd say 75% helpful, either women lifters or, male coaches who are training women lifters, being like, this video helped me. Can I talk to you about this? Great. 25% creepy dudes.
Trolls. But yeah, that unfortunately comes with the territory. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just like, yes, great. Yeah. You saw me talk about peeing. And the video, I think, has the video from nationals of me.
Yeah. Yep.
Peeing on the platform. So
I think it actually has her too. I think she's doing it too.
She struggled with it too. It's something that's so big for people. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're fine.
At any big national meet like that, in the women's session, at the end, there is just a giant stain on the carpet platform.
Yeah.
Because it happens to so many people. So within the community, no one's horrified by it.
Right.
But nobody likes doing it. Right.
It's just part of the culture, though. It's definitely well, and I think, and you're more in tune to this now than I am, but I feel like there was really not a lot of awareness or even anything you could do about it for postpartum moms where it was socially a little bit more understood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I still think that women who haven't had kids, there's no space for them. There hasn't been we can only talk about this when we have kids or when you're pregnant. And so it was such a kind of unique thing to have you in your mid-20s be totally fine having this conversation and wanting to educate that. It was just so unheard of, to be quite honest. And even now, I think it's a little bit better, but I don't know, you tell me, do you feel like, that the lifting world that's not pregnant, do you feel like that's part of the conversation or a little bit more elevated?
I think it's definitely increased.
Okay.
And I think that video helped a lot.
Not for nothing.
I'm not going to take credit.
You did a great, no, but you did a great job.
Kept talking about it on her platform as well, because I will say probably one thing Meg and I have in common, why we were friends, is, we're both, not wilting flowers.
No, no, you're not. But that's what made it work, because you guys made it fun and approachable and that sort of thing.
So I'm not embarrassed to talk about those things. So it's
that makes it so
somebody's got to do it.
Yeah,
so I have no shame, so I'll do it.
So all right, so we're turning the corner here. We're going to have a baby.
Yes.
So how did kind of that experience, how did that shape how you were looking at pregnancy and kind of you're how many weeks now?
I am 21 weeks today.
Okay, so we're halfway.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So how did that experience kind of shape how you were looking forward at pregnancy, and then kind of what you've experienced so far?
Yeah. So I think that, that experience, it just made me so much more aware of these issues, right? So you're talking about how it was so much more common to talk about it in pregnant and postpartum women. That meant that when I went to look for information about it, there was a lot more information about pregnant and postpartum people than there was about me at the time, right? So I was like, oh, I'm going to read whatever I can find.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think I was just a lot more aware of it. And again, I said going into, working with you, part of my motivation for that was that I intended to get pregnant eventually, and I wanted to deal with this now. So I was thinking about it from that perspective as well. So I knew that you couldn't just Kegel everything away. I knew a little bit about different modifications that, I might have to expect. And as time went on, I had more friends who lift who got pregnant and watched them go through that as well. So Meg just was pregnant last year.
Yep.
Other friends that I've known at different gyms across time, like, a lot of us are getting to the age where we're starting to have kids,
Yep.
and yeah, so just watching a lot of other people's experience and what they went through and just being in tune to that, I think really helped to prepare me to know that I wanted to make it a priority, right?
Yeah.
So it's unfortunately not something that's, considered standard of care for pregnant people
Right.
in the US and, all of that.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to be able to, prioritize that financially and say,
Yep.
I'm going to go find a pelvic floor physical therapist and work with someone and make sure that I'm thinking about these things and bringing in a professional because I knew it would be important to me. And I always intended that once I got pregnant, I'm going to prioritize
That
that.
you would do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of a challenge because we kind of DM'd a little bit trying to
Mm-hmm.
find resources.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that were working with pregnant women, but we're lifter friendly.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And
tell me a little bit about that experience.
yeah, so I actually really, so for context, when I was working with Carrie, I lived near her. I've moved since then. So I'm now in the Western New York area. And, so Carrie was very kind in helping me look for physical therapists in this area since we unfortunately couldn't work together, in person. So I was very lucky and ultimately found someone that I've been to a few sessions with so far, and she's been really great.
Good.
She's also a lifter herself. So I've been working with her name's Dr. Christine Abrams here in Buffalo, New York. And she's really helped me, I have a lot of questions as someone
Yeah.
who reads a lot about this and cares a lot about training
Yeah.
and all of that. So she's been really helpful, and she understands when I ask about lifting, like high bar squat versus a low bar squat versus a safety bar squat versus I'm
Yep.
feeling pain in this kind of a movement but not that one, right? And so she lifts herself, so she understands that too, and it's been really helpful to have
That's
that.
awesome. Yeah, no, and I think for especially somebody like you that this is like you know your stuff, like
Mhm.
just even a cursory wouldn't quite be enough, you
Right.
know. Um
Because I'm
and
constantly noticing things like as I'm training, I'm like, well, is
no,
this
but
a
that's good
concern?
though.
Well, is
Like
this a concern? Right.
well, I mean yeah, it's better than ignoring. Let's put it that way.
I might go a little over the top sometimes, but I try
That's all
to.
good. It's all good. But no, I think it's so incredibly important to find and I think the resources are growing. I mean, if you'd look for that 5 years ago, you wouldn't have found it.
Mhm,
To find resources that know your sport and can speak that
mhm,
language and speak to being pregnant. And I think even in pro sports and Olympic level and that sort of thing, there's so many more moms that
mhm,
are showing up and competing well.
mhm.
And I think it's just much more visible now, but I'm glad that there's more resources that are specializing because, I mean, how does it feel when you walk in and you've got to literally explain everything to somebody? Like, can you just want to hand them like a big sheet of paper and be like, learn this?
Right? You're like, okay, well, so powerlifting is, and
Exactly. Exactly.
but again, I think I was pretty used to it, as
Right. You're
well
like,
to
I
deal
got
with a lot
this.
of medical professionals. Like, oh, like my OB isn't a lifter,
Right.
but she was very, the first appointment was like, so what kind of exercise do you do? And I'm like, let me tell you,
I
and let
lift
me be
heavy
very
things.
clear about how heavy it is. I mean, I'm not actively competing now in the last 2 years, but just I'm still lifting,
Yeah.
right? Pretty heavy. And so I was like using some examples. Like I have someone I know that was pregnant and competed at like 7 months and was
Oh my
going heavy.
goodness.
So I was throwing out her numbers just to see how my OB would react.
Oh my
And
goodness.
she was like, "Oh wow, that's so impressive. It's so good to stay strong." And I was like, "Okay, I can
Ah,
work with
okay.
you."
Okay. If she hasn't rolled her eyes yet, we're good to go, right?
Right, exactly.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
was just like, let me like I it's like concrete examples, right?
Yeah.
Because if you say I'm a woman who lifts,
Right.
people are like, "Oh, that's nice for you."
I've found even working with postpartum women that women will say that, but like they do like 5 pound hand weights or things like that. And
Mhm.
so I really have to be clear.
Yes.
And the nice thing now is, I had a mom in the other day, and she's regularly, throws around, 250 for,
Mhm.
for amateur deadlift. I think that's fantastic for
Yeah,
a
no, that's
woman.
huge.
And
Yeah.
and and she's like, "Yeah, so I'm doing this." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, you look like you could do that." I'm like, "Yeah, you could
Mhm.
totally do that." And then the other
Yeah.
thing is having women that I'm like, I know you're lifting these 5-pound things, and I know you think they're heavy, but I know you have
You're so
a
much
he
stronger than that. If you're picking up your
exactly.
kid, you're stronger than
Exactly. Exactly.
that.
So as far as like you're 20 weeks in now, like
Mhm.
what's kind of matched up to kind of be realistic for you, and anything that hasn't been to this point?
Yeah, so I think what surprised me the most was how quickly I experienced changes, right?
Mm.
So, in the first trimester, of course, I knew to expect that, I'd probably feel sick. I think on, any level outside of training, even I had no idea how miserable that would
It's not
be.
it can be not fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't, frankly, objectively, I didn't even have it that bad, but just the way it's like so all-consuming, it never ends. I mean, it
Yes.
ends, but it feels like it never ends,
That's
right? It's
that's
just
correct. Yes.
even if I'm not throwing up, I'm constantly nauseous, right?
Nauseous.
So
Yeah.
the effect of that on my training and just the overall exhaustion was a huge part. I had to cut way back. And
Yeah.
now at 21 weeks, I can do so much more. I can lift so much more. I can train longer. I can do more sets, like all of
Yep.
that, right? But even before my body physically changed at all, because I don't think I really started showing at all until like maybe within the last month or two,
Yeah.
month and a half. And but even before my body physically visibly changed at all, it was just I felt different. I had a lot of lower back pain. I
Yeah.
had a trouble stabilizing my back. I had joint pain, all of that. And like being someone who has been squatting regularly over and over for a decade at heavy weights,
Right.
suddenly it's like the bounce out of the hole disappeared. Right? Like the tension was gone. Like I
Oh,
know exactly what it should feel like in the bottom of
and
the
it wasn't
squat,
there.
and it wasn't
Was
there.
that
Right?
scary?
Ah, it was, you could feel it on warm up. So it's not like a
Okay, so you're like, "Oh,
heavy
hello."
weight crash down.
I got you. I
But
got you.
but yeah, yeah. And it's like the strength was there. It
Right.
just was like, oh, that was a bad rep, you
Oh,
know?
that's so funny. Oh my god. So
Yeah.
I've never had a bounce out of a squat. I have some depth issues, so I'm like, I was like, I dream of that, but yeah, now I know
Right.
that feeling.
Yeah. It just like the bounce was just gone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh my
And
gosh.
and just my joints and my lower back. Yeah, and I work with a coach and she was like, very responsive and change things and understanding. And, I
Yeah.
told her as soon as I knew I was pregnant and all of that. So
Yep.
like it's great. But yeah, so that was probably the biggest surprise to me. And it was a
Yeah.
frustration because I was like, I know I'm gonna have to modify things. I'm not
Right.
thinking I'm gonna be, squatting 250 all through pregnancy, right? Like I
Right.
get it, but I was like, but really, I'm like 8 weeks. Like, come on. Like, right. And it feels like it's never going to get better. But now I am
Right.
stronger than I was
Yeah,
then.
but it
And
it it definitely puts a question mark there. It's funny
mhm,
that, with subsequent pregnancies too, I because everything, I think has kind of been through that first shift. I always tell
mhm,
women, I'm like, I swear to God, sometimes like the second you conceive, all of a sudden, whatever symptoms you had before, all of a sudden it might come back out of nowhere. And you're thinking,
mhm,
what the heck is going on? And then you find
mhm.
out a couple weeks later you're pregnant. Like it's amazing how different it can be. But you do like literally like the second all of a sudden, like the hormones start
It
going,
just
everybody starts
changes.
doing their thing.
And
You're like,
yeah,
what?
it was a back pain that I've had before, right? It was
Yeah,
not
it's like
an
stuff that comes
unusual, it was
back. Yeah.
exactly, I was
Yep.
like, eh,
Yep.
is this the pregnancy or is this just my back?
Yeah.
Right. And you're like,
Yep.
but no, it was,
Yep. That happened to
yeah.
me. It was interesting when I got pregnant with my oldest. I was being treated for SI issues and back issues because
Mhm.
I had hip surgery 15 years ago.
Okay.
And my colleague was treating me, and I was doing really great. And then one day I was like, I'm just not doing great. And I think it was like a
Mhm.
weekend or two after he taught ultrasound
Mhm.
imaging course. And so I was the model. And he's like, oh, your uterus is looking a little big. And then like the week later, I found out I was pregnant. So there was like all
Like,
these
I wonder
signs.
why my uterus looks a little
So it's
big.
like your back is jacked, your uterus is big. Like, come on, Carrie,
Mhm.
why don't we put this together?
Yeah. No, I swear I took like a day or two off work before I found out I was pregnant because I kept being like, I just feel like I'm about to get sick. And if I just rest,
Then
I'll
it'll
feel
be
better.
okay, right?
But I
And then
didn't
it
feel
didn't go away.
better.
No,
Yeah. But
no.
then I found out why. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to stop using sick leave because it's not going to make me
Right. You're
better.
like, and so this is normal now. So
This is my
what's
life.
so kind of to that note, like what's kind of been the most challenging thing kind of going through this, knowing kind of your athletic capacity, knowing that you've wanted to do this and what's coming? Like what are you having a hard time finding answers to?
I would say, I kind of mentioned earlier that I'm like, I always have a lot of questions and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, is this a concern? Is this a concern? I think, for me, that's really manifested a lot in, am I coning? Am I coning? I looked down and that changed my positioning and that made me
And
cone,
that
but if
caused
I'm
your
not
cone.
looking down,
Yeah.
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 So I've been doing that. And I think that kind of ties to on the whole, like, the uncertainty around how delivery and postpartum will go. No one can tell me that, right? No one can
Right.
tell me if I'm
Right.
gonna, deliver vaginally or have a C-section or if I'm gonna tear or if I'm gonna,
Yeah.
no one can know, right? And so it's, is this gonna cause diastasis recti? No one can tell me that, right?
Well, considering 100% of women have it in pregnancy, yes, it will. Will
Yes.
you have
Well, yes.
residual? Don't know.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yeah. There's no way this
No.
baby's gonna grow without the
Right,
abs.
exactly. Exactly.
Um, but yeah, so I think it's I don't know that it's so much a lack of available information as just the overall uncertainty,
Just not
right?
knowing. Yeah.
Just not knowing is
Yeah.
hard, right? Because I'm very used to, especially like as a power lifter, it's like, let me plan out my training cycle and let me have my
Yes.
progression. And obviously, like injury happens in,
Right.
regular training outside of pregnancy. Like you can't predict the future, but you're used to being able to like, that's what I'm going to do. Right.
Right.
And so, kind of off on a tangent, but I do think some of that, having experienced other injuries in the past and training around other injuries, is helpful
That's
in
helped you.
dealing with that. So I kind of
Yeah.
frame that the same way mentally. Like I've
Yep.
always trained around and through injuries, like just do what you can that doesn't hurt it.
Yep.
And so I think that mindset has helped, except it's
Yeah.
like, it's not like you're getting better. You're just constantly changing when you're pregnant. So it's like
Yes.
another unpredictable situation every 2 weeks.
It's funny when it that's so true though, but I always tell people it's a half joke, half not, is that that's what's going to prepare you for being a parent
Mm.
and being a mom because like my kids are older now and again I go pick them up from school and it's like picking up a grenade. You don't
Yeah.
know what you're picking up. Like did they have a good day? Did they have a bad day? Is somebody going to
Yeah.
cry? Do I have to learn decimal multiplication tonight? Like you just and that's when they're older. When they're younger, it's like there's so many things you just don't know.
Mhm.
And you having lived in the DC area, I think this would be familiar to you. Like I feel like the moms that are so rigid, and I can say this because again, I laminated my birth plan, so not proud of it, but I feel like I have a voice here is that the more you plan for every little piece, it's going to
Mhm.
come bite you in the ass. It
Right.
really just, and this is one of those things that you have to roll with it for what you said is like a lot of these things you just don't know.
Right.
And so what I tell moms now is because you don't want to project on anybody. I'm like, look, prepare for all the things so that way if something comes up, you're not blindsided. But
Mhm.
it's so heartbreaking to me when I hear a mom that says, well, I got exactly what I didn't want, which was a C-section. And I know that
Mhm.
feeling, but I also know 8 and 11 years later that you're going to be just fine.
Right. Right.
But it's so hard to put that in somebody's head. And I'm like, I wish I could just put you in here for a second and show you it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
learn as much as you can so you're not scared. And so you
Right.
can make the decisions you need to make. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me on that, like I don't have like a strong attachment to like birth plan or like a, you know, idyllic picture of
Don't
what birth
laminate it.
will look like. I
Don't do
don't
it.
have that. I think, you know, for me as an athlete, I'm like, yeah, I'd really prefer to not have someone cut into my abs. Like,
But they don't
and
cut.
that,
But
what's that?
they don't cut. I only learned this like a couple years
I
ago. Is
didn't
that
know
and
this.
no, they
See,
cut.
so I'm getting more information
No,
here.
they just kind of pull the tissues apart. There's no cutting.
Oh,
I mean, obviously they have to cut
cut
through
the
the uterus and that
skin.
sort of thing
Yeah,
too. But I'm
yeah,
like, but there's still something funky that happens. Like again,
yeah.
having been
Oh,
through two,
yeah.
it's a little funky.
It's different, right? But
But
that's the thing
I
is
hear
trying to like
you. Yeah,
realize other athletes and
exactly.
you know other lifters that have had a C-section and be like, okay, yeah, like just like when you get
It's not
any,
death. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. There's ways to recover,
exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
knowing that you know I might not know what all of them are right now. I'll deal with that if I come to it. But
Exactly.
there's ways
Across
to
that bridge.
recover, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah,
now that you're all knowing at 21 weeks,
all knowing, yeah, right. I'm like
at least
every week
you
it's like,
you've got what vegetable or fruit are you at now? I
oh,
forget what it is.
banana today.
Banana. A
Large
large
banana. I
banana.
really love when the app specifies large or small. I'm like, you're just running out of fruits.
Right, exactly.
I'm like, you just couldn't find a good one. So you
No.
just said like, I was like, one week it was like, you know, small potato or something. I'm like, is it going to be large potato next
Like, are we
week?
talking
Like, wow, how
russet?
creative.
Right?
Yeah.
Are we talking potato chips? Like, what are we talking
Yeah,
here?
exactly. The little like
Exactly.
little baby potatoes, maybe in the
Yeah.
first trimester. No, but
So now
yeah,
that you're
it's
all
like
knowing,
yes.
what would you say kind of with what you have kind of learned up till this point? Kind of what advice do you have?
Yeah, I guess it's the advice that I try to remind myself of because I am still have a long way to go,
Yeah.
which is to take it one day at a time
Yeah.
and to be aware of your body, but not obsessive. Like I said, it's very easy for me to be hyper aware, right? Because as a lifter, I think we are always hyper aware of what our bodies are doing in space.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they're doing a lot of weird things right now. So, and I think far more weirder things to come for me. Um,
Yes. I'm just gonna leave
you
that
leave
one at
that there.
yes.
Yeah. It's, you know, I don't even know yet. Right. So, but yeah, so I think that's a big part of it.
That's awesome.
And, you know, so much I think for lifters is often, you know, you have a good workout and you're feeling strong and you're like, oh, you know, I think I can go up next week. I think I can lift more next week. And I have to like stop those thoughts in my head and go, I don't know what next week will be like. I'm just glad I lifted this today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that athlete mindset you got to watch sometimes.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, well, what if it's fine to think that, but don't like make that an expectation that then you're going to be disappointed when you don't feel as good next week. Right. Because it doesn't matter.
That's awesome.
You'll get in and you'll do what you can. And so I have to constantly remind myself of that and then also not turn that into, well, I feel good today, so I should just put on 20 more pounds.
Yeah. Keep that like so you're gonna play this back to yourself so I'm glad we have this recorded. You're gonna play this back to yourself at like 12 weeks and you know all that stuff. So
yes, when I'm having the same thought process postpartum where I'm like, well, I feel good today.
Exactly. I'm just gonna I'll put it in your DM. I'll just play it in
yes,
your DM the audio.
Thank you. I need it because these are the things that, like I said, it's like I'm not giving advice to anybody else. I'm giving advice to myself.
Exactly.
I need to learn.
so I might hold you to this and maybe, you know, when you get to a comfortable point postpartum, we'll go for full circle. And when you come back and you can tell me how it all went.
I'll watch this before I get on. I'll be like, wow, I had no idea.
Honestly, so that's something I do say to moms. I was like, look, there's a conversation that we're going to be able to have a couple weeks postpartum that I could have with you now, but you can't like, and it sounds really rude, but I'm like, you won't understand.
You just don't get it, right?
There's no way to get it. Like there's no way. And you can hear the words, but you don't get it.
Yep.
We'll have that conversation. But yeah, I would love to have you back when you're ready on the other side of all this, and
Awesome.
we get to meet him or her and see
Yes.
the cute baby cheeks and all
Little
that
baby
good stuff.
cheeks all holding up
Exactly, exactly.
here.
Well, thank you so much again. It's been super cool to be able to watch kind of how much of an impact you've had, I think, on other women who lift. And then I'm so excited to kind of see this next part of the journey and kind of where you go from there. So thank you so much for sharing it and being so open. And I can't wait to see what happens on the other side.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All
It was
right.
great to chat with you.
You too.